I'm the Doctor, and I save people. And do I have something on my face? Ah, well, it's Christmas themed. I know it's not Christmas anymore, but I still like these sunglasses. I brought these sunglasses because they had the Christmas theme. I thought I could use them for Earth Agents, or in a episode of Earth Agents, and they just stuck around ever since. Had some good use out of these sonic sunglasses. Sunglasses. On with the ranking. Hello ladies and gentlemen, Nick here and welcome to my ranking of Doctor Who Series 9. Hang on, here we go. Or Season 35. Don't worry, I'm not going to be wearing these throughout the entire ranking. It's just for a joke. So, Doctor Who Series 9. Widely considered the weakest series of the revived series. Well, unless you're a hater of the Whittaker era, of course. As for me, well, Series 9 did used to be my favourite series, but after rewatching it, I actually enjoyed quite a lot of it. No, it's not perfect. It's probably still one of the weakest series, but I don't know if I would say it's the worst one anymore. I'm going to have to come back to you guys with a ranking of the revised series, and of course the ranking of overall series, because now I don't think I would put it too far down on that either. Again, I'm going to have to come back. It might still be low down on that one. That's a 38 season ranking, 39 maybe, by the time that video even comes out, because Series 13 is on its way. But, depends when I make it, of course. Or it might even get updated next year. But as for the current new series ranking out of 12 and the current overall season ranking out of 38, this one would be low down, but I don't think I would put it at the bottom of the new series one. I'm going to have to double check that. I might be wrong. And it certainly wouldn't be at the bottom of the overall one, but it'd still be quite low. But maybe not as low as I initially thought. So, yeah, I'm going to have to come back to you guys with the overall rankings. But after rewatching it, Series 9 wasn't as bad as I expected it to be. I actually enjoyed quite a lot of it. Don't get me wrong, there are some bad episodes, and the series arc is quite weak, and that's probably why this one is so low down. But there was some good stuff in there, so yeah, I'm being honest, I'm being truthful, I'm giving my subjective opinions and my objective facts. So without further ado, the Series 9 ranking. But first, the episodes that appear in Series 9 are Last Christmas, The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar, Under the Lake and Before the Flood, The Girl Who Died, The Woman Who Lived, The Zygon Invasion and The Zygon Inversion, Sleep No More, Face the Raven, Heaven Sent, Hellbent, and The Husbands of River Song. So that's the episodes that we'll be looking at this series. And by the way, this series was supposed to be a series mostly comprised of two-parters, but it's just the usual three again. The last three episodes formed a 3-episode trilogy, and there were 2 in the middle that formed a 2-episode duology, but those 2 weren't a two-parter, and those other last 3 weren't a 3-parters. They were still 2 episodes that made 2 stories, but they were connected, and 3 episodes that made 3 episodes that were connected. There were only really 3 proper 3-parters over 6 episodes. The other 6 episodes were all standalone episodes, even if 2 connected with each other and another 3 connected with each other. And that's not even counting the Christmas specials, which were both also standalone. Although you could argue that only one true standalone is Sleep No More, but considering the other 5 episodes that form the duology and the trilogy of individual episodes are all still individual stories, they're just connected with each other, then yeah, there are 6 individual episodes in this series. 8 if you include the specials. So much for a whole series comprised of mostly 2-parters when you only really have the usual 3. Well, the usual 3 prior to Series 6 anyway, and then it was 2 for that one, and then 1 in Series 8 and 10, and then 2 again in Series 12, and then none in 7 and 11. So yeah, we're only back to the usual 3 for this series, so yeah, and as for Series 13, we'll be lucky if we even get 1. Considering they had to chop some episodes out thanks to COVID. But anyway, on to Series 9 ranking, starting with honourable mentions first, which are the prologue episodes. Prologue. And The Doctor's Meditation. The latter of which I think is better. I prefer Meditation to Prologue. It had a bit more of a story to it. A Prologue was just a deleted scene from Magician's Apprentice, whilst Meditation actually felt like its own minisode in its own right. Both of them are much better than the two episodes they're serving as prologues to. It is strange that these are the only two prologues for this series. There's no prologues for any other episode. Okay, now that I've rambled long enough about the series and the episodes that will be in it and the prologues, it's time to actually rank the actual episodes of the series, starting with number 11, because there are 11 serials in this story. Otherwise it'd be 14 episodes. But there's 3 two-parters it'll be doing story-wise. So there's 11, and we will start with the worst episode of the series at number 11. Not a fucking surprise to anybody. Hellbent. I don't need to add anything else that I already haven't said. This episode sucks. Okay, positives. It does look good. The direction is pretty spectacular, some lovely visuals, and the acting is brilliant. And the first third was actually pretty good for the most parts. But then once the Doctor, once we got to the scene where Clara was extracted from the chamber, it just went downhill faster than when the Doctor jumped out of that window in Heaven Sent. It went downhill, and it had the moment where the Doctor shot the General, and that is basically the worst moment of Doctor Who. The Doctor he just killed a man who was on his side, just out of selfish acts. I mean, yeah, fair enough. You miss Clara, Doctor, and you want her to help, but then you try to save her when you know she should be dead, and you kill one of your friends whilst doing it. And he was in the right. And it just got worse, and then the story just got worse and worse and worse and worse as it went along. I mean, that moment you can't really top as the worst moment, but the story itself got worse as we went on, and it just this story felt pointless. Once the Doctor had overthrown Rassilon, the story felt pointless, and the whole stuff with the hybrid comes to a shit conclusion. There really isn't a proper conclusion to this story arc. The Doctor claims that he became the hybrid when he became evil. Well, if you hadn't been so selfish and tried to bring back Clara, this wouldn't have happened. Not to mention, it completely discredits Heaven Sent for that the Doctor learnt nothing, and it ruins Clara's death in Face the Raven. So this episode is ruining itself and the previous 2 episodes. Not to mention wrapping up a already weak story arc in a really terrible way. In fact, very underwhelming, very unsatisfying, and very bad way. In fact, I still not even sure what the hybrid is. I mean, the Doctor says he became the hybrid, but it's still not really made clear. So this whole story arc comes down to basically one word. Well, 2 words actually. Absolutely nothing. I mean, say what you like about the Timeless Child arc, but A, it's not finished yet, and B, what we have learnt about it has achieved more than what we did with the hybrid. More stuff happened with part of this ongoing story arc with the Timeless Children than anything with the hybrid. So I actually think the Timeless Child arc is better because they actually do more stuff in the first stages of the story arc than they do with the hybrid. The hybrid, it's just there in the background a few times, only brought up occasionally, and then it comes to a super disappointing conclusion. The Timeless Children, at least it's still ongoing, so if as unsatisfying as the first stage of the arc is, we've got more to come, so we have the chance to rectify that. We've got the chance to have a better conclusion to that. The hybrid doesn't do that. Whilst with the Timeless Children, we've still got time. We've still got another series or 2 or 3, depending on how long it goes on, to see how it goes, and hopefully we'll wrap it up in a satisfying way. That'll stop people being so pissy. Or at least not piss as many people off as the Revelation in Series 12 did. But like I said, we've got time. We have time to rectify that. But with this, there's no chance of rectification unless there's a retcon. So, yeah. So Hellbent. The worst episode of the series, one of the worst episodes of the show, and it's definitely the worst series finale. Classical revival. No competition. Moving on to number 10. And this series is unique in having that the worst two stories are the opening and closing stories of the season. Everything else that comes in the middle, plus the specials, are much better than these three episodes. We already covered the finale, so number 10 is The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. As Hellbent poorly concluded the story arc of the series, Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar poorly set up the story arc of the series. Not to mention, we kind of get a bit of a weak Dalek story. In fact, this is probably the second worst Dalek story after Asylum of the Daleks. I mean, Asylum of the Daleks was worse than this. Not as bad as Hellbent, but worse than this story. Magician's Apprentice and Witch's Familiar. It's a bad story. First half is quite dull to begin with for the first half of that episode, and then not really much happens afterwards. It's a bit of a slow build up. In fact, this episode does feel more like a prologue than the prologue minisode and Doctor's Medication both felt. And then when we get to Skaro, the Daleks are kind of badly treated. Moffat just doesn't get the Daleks. And that has been a major problem with the bigger Dalek stories that he's written. Not so bad with the cameos and the major appearances in stories that aren't really Dalek stories. He's actually able to write them well there. But when it comes to the main Dalek stories, with the exception of Victor of the Daleks, which was by Mark Gatiss, Stephen Moffat hasn't been very successful. Into the Dalek had Phil Ford write most of that story, so he managed to salvage that one a bit more. But with the other two major Dalek stories of the Moffat era, sucked. And this Witch's Familiar fucks up the Daleks the most. It changes so much about the Daleks that it just feels wrong. Even Destiny of the Daleks didn't go this far, and they turned the Daleks into another race of robots. That story did, but even that story didn't go as far as saying, "Oh, it's not the mutants aren't controlling the tank. The tank is suppressing is channeling the mutants' emotions and firing a gun, and the tank wants to be the one who kills people." And then at the end, it turns out that how the Doctor asks, "How did a bit of mercy get inside the Daleks' DNA?" And yet, we already established in this episode that it was the tanks that were the ones who were the hateful Nazis, not the mutants. Hence the whole stuff with Clara inside the Dalek tank. It was so badly handled. And on top of that was the Doctor and Davros stuff. Whilst it was acted brilliantly, executed brilliantly in a direction and visual sense, it ultimately went... the whole conversation stuff, while some great conversations, it meant absolutely nothing because neither of them meant what they said. So there was hardly any point. I mean, it's one thing if Davros was trying to trick the Doctor or the Doctor tried to trick Davros, but them both tricking each other? I did mention this at the time, but also I'm not really a fan of Davros opening his eyes. I think that kind of again changes the whole point about having the single eye you can see through. But honestly, that's one of my lesser problems with the episode compared to what I've already just mentioned. I'm just grateful Chris Chibnall wrote the next Dalek story, not the next proper Dalek story. The next 3 times the Daleks appeared were cameos in Moffat episodes, but I'm just glad the next proper Dalek story was written by Chris Chibnall, because for all his faults as a writer, Chris Chibnall knows how to write the Daleks, as evident in both of his Dalek stories released so far. So all I can say is thank fuck that we got Chris Chibnall to write the next 2 proper Dalek stories. Because this is a fucking mess. Not Chibnall's stories, Moffat's last proper Dalek story. And his other ones. Moving on to number 9. Now, things are a little bit more positive, but we're not into happy territory yet. Number 9. This is an episode that quite a few people would expect to see low on the list. Second last or last. But in my case, it's third to last. Oh, I'm sure they'd still be happy to see it low down anyway. Sleep No More. Mark Gatiss' weakest script, and the gimmicky found footage episode. Now, I do like the approach that they're going. I do like the ideas they've got, and the idea of sand getting into people's eyes and floating in the air and recording the stuff. That's interesting. That's really good. That's really well handled. But I don't think the story works too well. The side characters are alright, but they're ultimately not brilliant. I do find it slightly offensive that the first transgender actor in the show plays a grunt in this episode. I'm sure Bethany Black enjoyed working on the episode, but I do find it slightly insulting, or at least strange, that she plays a grunt. So much for progression, guys. I also found the found footage stuff actually was a gimmick for this episode, and it was too well directed and too well shot that it felt too professional for a found footage story. I did like Rasmussen, and his plan made sense for the story. I don't think the story quite worked. I don't think we're quite there, or at the very least, it should have been made to look a bit more found footagey, then more it looks too professional, too much like a normal story, but with a bit more shaky cam and some fuzziness. So yeah, I don't think they pulled it off too well, although I applaud them for trying. There, that's the applause for trying. Okay, we're now into good territory, but not spectacular. Starting with number 8, which is Face the Raven. Now, I already mentioned a few issues I had with this story in the review, but I do find the idea interesting. There are some really good elements to it, like the whole Trap Street idea and looking for it on maps and above London's skyline. The whole investigating it in the first 13 minutes was really good. And I think Clara's death was really well handled. It was worked pretty well, and the whole mystery stuff does kind of work a little bit. Yeah, it works to an extent. I think it might have been a better story if it wasn't the start of the 3-part trilogy that wraps up the series. And it was more of a standalone episode, but it does kind of work effectively on that as well. But I think it might have worked better as a standalone episode. But yeah, it's good. I don't think it's great, but it's good. Loved the first 13 minutes when they were trying to find the Trap Street. Moving on to number 7, the 2014 Christmas special, Last Christmas. Yeah, it was a good Christmas special. I mean, it was a bit convoluted, a bit complicated, but it was still pretty good, pretty well executed, and we're traveling to different. We're not traveling, but we're going to different dreams, and experiencing those. It works pretty well. Although it does feel a lot more like a Series 8 episode than Series 9, but I guess enough weeks had passed for it to not be included on the Series 8 box set, so it was a Series 9 episode instead. That doesn't excuse Resolution from not being on the Series 11 box set, even though it's considered a Series 11 episode. Anyway, so yeah, Last Christmas was a pretty good episode. It could have been better, but it was good. Also, I enjoyed Nick Frost as Santa Claus. Moving on to number 6, this one actually was quite low down, and I was actually surprised how much I really liked it when I rewatched it. But it is very much an episode of 2 halves, and judging by that description, if you've watched the review, you'll probably know which episode I'm talking about. The Woman Who Lived. Right, so The Woman Who Lived has a fantastic first half where it is mainly the Doctor and Ashilda / Lady Me having some character drama, as well as also going on a heist, breaking into someone's house and robbing them, basically. But the second half focuses its shift onto Leandro the Lion Man, and yeah, it just feels like it was something to keep the kids entertained whilst all this drama stuff was going on with the Doctor and Me, which does carry on into the second half, but it does feel more undermined by the actual sci-fi plot of the episode as opposed to the drama or the historical side of the plot. But the emotional angles of the episode, especially in the first half, was really well done. This was absolutely brilliant, brilliantly directed. Catherine Tregenna writes a brilliant episode and does drama really well, as evident from her Torchwood episodes. But unfortunately, the sci-fi angle in this story, besides the objects they were trying to find, the Eye of Hades, but besides that and the time travel, the sci-fi angle didn't really work, not with Lion Man and his invasion force, etc. I did suggest a way of how I would have improved it without having the need for Leandro the Lion to be in the episode, or at least beyond maybe a brief cameo. But yeah, so you'll have to check out the review for that suggestion. But yeah, as the episode stands, it's great to begin with. It's fantastic even, but then it goes a bit downhill, which is why I had to give it the 7 out of 10 score, because the fantastic stuff meant it couldn't go any lower, but the Leandro the Lion stuff meant it couldn't go any higher either, so it had to go in that 7 spot. It used to be a bit low in my opinion because of the Leandro stuff, but because the emotional stuff was so fantastic, that's why it went up in my opinion. That's why it's sick from this list. However, I completely understand if people would put it lower on their lists because of what happened with Leandro. Maybe they're bored by the Ishilda drama stuff, or both. I'm not sure. It's other people's opinions. They can tell me. Please don't put it into lengthy essays. Just do a summary. A small one. Moving on to number 5. Now, these 2 episodes also had great drama. This time, I think they managed to focus on what they needed to focus on more than Woman Who Lived did. And these are the Zygon Invasion and the Zygon Inversion. This is a really great 2-part story dealing with the fallout of the Zygon human peace, following the death of Osgood A, as I called her, in Death in Heaven. Now, I said Osgood A as to clarify between the Osgoods who appear in the series. Osgood A dies in Death in Heaven. Osgood B is the one who gets kidnapped by the Zygons in this one, and Osgood C is the one who joins her at the end. No idea which one's Zygon, which one's human, although one of them at the end is definitely Zygon because that's Bonnie in disguise. I'm kind of predicting that the one in the story is the human one and the one who died in Death in Heaven is a Zygon. It just feels a bit more natural, but that's just me. But yeah, this story does the terrorism plot and the response to that, and the whole anti-war message really well. Yeah, the speech is a bit in the face, but Peter Capaldi delivers it so well with so much passion. Then it's a marvelous speech. Although I'm not so keen on the bits where he goes a bit silly, like when he's doing the American game show stuff. Maybe that's a kind of a cover it, like when the Ninth Doctor was being all happy-go-lucky. In the scenes in Parting the Ways when he went to confront the Daleks, but then when he went back inside the TARDIS, he rested his head against the TARDIS in distraught. Perhaps this was something similar here, but it just felt a bit more silly than what happened in Parting the Ways. Some sort of coping mechanism, or Farad or whatever. So I thought it was a bit strange here. But the actual speech itself from the Doctor, basically getting angry with the humans and the Zygons in that scene, that was spectacularly done. The rest of the story also has quite a lot of good stuff going for it, like with Bonnie taking over Clara's body, giving Jenna Coleman her best performance of the series, I believe. I would say, or at least the best performance in Doctor Who as Bonnie the Zygon. Best performance as Clara Oswald. I'm not quite sure about that, to be honest. But yeah, she does fantastic. I love the whole threat and the danger of the plot, and how anybody could be a Zygon and any of them could come after the humans, and also the Zygons who don't want to be part of this. It's quite threatening. It's quite a dangerous story. There are a few silly bits like the Doctor being all Dr. Disco and down with the kids, etc. Basically, the series has been trying to turn Peter Capaldi's 12th Doctor, well, mainly the opening story and a little bits in this one, and then bits of other episodes as well. I've been trying to turn him into a parody of the 11th Doctor, and a really bad one at that. And it's mainly the opening 2 episodes, or especially Magician's Apprentice, namely that tank scene, when they did that, and there have been bits across this series that they've done that as well, and these two episodes are good examples of that. I think the story is brilliant, but I think it could have been even better if it lost some of those sillier moments that they do with the Doctor. Moving on to number 4. Speaking of silly, pantomime time. It's The Husbands of River Song. Now, this one has some similarities to The Time of the Doctor. It's the last on-screen appearance of River Song, and they do a couple of silly stuff in the episode, like some awkward jokes and stuff. There's some funny ones, but there's a couple of awkwardness in there. The difference between this and Time of the Doctor is that most of the episode is intended to be a fun comedy romp, so it's able to have a few more jokes in there that do work, but there's also a couple of jokes that don't work, like Time of the Doctor. I also think this is pretty much a good tribute to River Song. This is her last on-screen appearance so far, and it's towards the end of her life. It's before she goes to the library and signs the Library Forest of the Dead, and it's also the last time the Doctor sees her in his timeline at this point in time. So it's a nice, neat, natural end. Yeah, the Doctor can meet her at other points in her life later on down in their life, but as of now, this is a nice, natural conclusion to River's story arc before she goes to the library, and a nice, natural end to her relationship with the Doctor. At least on screen anyway. And it's a fun, rompy adventure, some enjoyable stuff. Nardole in this story is completely different to what he's like in Series 10. He's very silly, very wimpy and a bit. He's definitely comic relief in this episode. But once we get to Series 10, he matures, he becomes more serious, and he becomes the guy who keeps the Doctor in check. Perhaps becoming a cyborg matured the character. Perhaps age matured him. Maybe he got older. He's definitely over 950 years because he helps the Doctor guard the vault. So, yeah, I guess the character matures really well in Series 10. But for this episode, he really is a wimpy character. Matt Lucas does a good job in the wimpiness, but I think he's even better when he becomes serious. We'll see that next series. Yay! And also, Greg Davis is so deliciously camp and over the top as Hydra Flax. He could get on people's nerves, but he's so over the top. It's funny. And I enjoyed the story. It had a good pace. It had some enjoyable moments. It was a fun comedy pantomime romp. And unlike Last Christmas, this fits Christmas Day's story really well. Last Christmas was a bit too convoluted for a Christmas story. A normal episode, it's convoluted enough for a normal episode, but I think it would have worked better as a normal episode. But as a Christmas special, it's really convoluted, and I don't think it fits being a Christmas special. But this definitely works as a Christmas special. This is the fun comedy adventure, and I suppose after the last one was a bit more of a horror story, this one is able to sit back, relax, and have a fun time. So yeah, it was a really entertaining ride. I mean, it's not perfect or anything, but it was a fun, enjoyable romp and a nice send-off for River Song. Yeah, I know she's not the most popular character, but it was a nice send-off for her anyway. Moving into top 3 territory, and we start off with number 3. Jamie Matheson returns to do another brilliant script with The Girl Who Died. Now, to be honest, this is his weakest of his 4 episodes that he writes, but it's still a really good episode. The stuff with the Maya it's funny. I mean, it would have been better if we didn't see them filling. We sort of saw part of the leader Maya earlier on, but then we didn't see it properly until later on. Either reveal it earlier or keep it a surprise. Then again, considering what it looked like, it wasn't really worth it. Doctor and Clara pretty great. Well, Clara's good in this one. Doctor's really great. This is my favourite episode with Ashilda. In all honesty, well, not only is it my favourite episode, it's also my favourite Ashilda performance and depiction of the character. This is before she becomes immortal and everything that happens afterwards. And yeah, I think the story of the Doctor being unable to help, but then trying to help, but he knows it's not going to work very well, and then I've got it. I've got this great plan that will almost certainly work. that's great. How it's progressing from the different stages of the Doctor. Initially not being able to help, then helping, but he's not got a proper plan at this stage, and then he gets a proper plan later. And the whole stuff when he's depressed about Ashilda's death and having a moan about it, and then he realizes he's got that current phase because it's to remind him he saves people, so he goes and saves Ashilda, but on reflection he may have overreacted a little bit. He might have been a bit too emotional and caused some problems. And judging by the rest of the series, well, at least the remaining episodes that Ashilda appears in, that may indeed have been the case. But yeah, The Girl Who Died was a really fun and really enjoyable story. Moving on to number 2, another really great, enjoyable story. This time written by another Doctor Who alumni, Toby Whithouse. Yes, this episode, it's these 2 episodes. After the major disappointment of the opening 2 episodes, we needed something to get this series back on track. Considering, because it only just started and we started on a major letdown, so we needed to get the series rolling properly. With these 2 episodes, it managed to do that, and on spectacular form. Number 2 is Under the Lake and Before the Flood. I love these 2 episodes. They are brilliant. They've got the best supporting characters of this series. They have one of the best threats of this series with the Fisher King, and it has one of the best plots. Such a really great story. In fact, considering my number 1 choice is a bit of a different style story, then this is probably the best of the traditional episodes of the series. It's a bit the best traditional story in the series. The great threats of the Ghost, the Fisher King, it works really well and everything's tying in pretty nicely. It's also a really good idea to travel back in time for half of the second episode to explore what goes on down there. It's really good. It also feels very much like a Based Under Siege episode story that the Patrick Troughton era would indulge in, and it works really well. I also like how they split up some of the characters when they did go back in time travel. And we also have the first deaf character in the series, although not the first deaf actor, but they pull off the character really well, and there was some great tension, especially in the second episode with that character. And it just worked so well. This episode was so good. My only real criticism is that Colin McFarlane, a well-known actor and a really good one at that, didn't do much before his character got turned into a ghost. He had a few minutes, but then his character died and then got turned into a ghost. My only real nitpick is that said character didn't get more to do before he got turned into a ghost. But that's a minor nitpick. He got quite a lot to do when he was a ghost, so there wasn't none of him in the episode. We got quite a bit of him. Also, the sonic screwdrivers were used pretty effectively in this story, considering they're not very much liked by fans, especially with their use in this series. But I think they were well used in this story. So now that brings me to number 1, the best episode of Doctor Who Series 9. If Hellbent was the worst episode of this series, then this episode is definitely the best of the series. The preceding episode, Heaven Sent. This episode is a masterpiece. The story is fantastic. Stephen Moffat has finally reached peak Moffat for the first time since Day of the Doctor. Rachel Talalay returns and does a spectacular job. I mean, she did a great job with Hellbent, but the story more than let that down. Whilst here, Talalay helps Moffat's script work spectacularly. She does such a fantastic job in the directing, and Peter Capaldi gives his best performance in the show. It's just so brilliant. Considering he's carrying most of the episode on his own, it works really well. Shout out also to the Veil, which is a pretty creepy monster and stalking the Doctor throughout the castle in his confession dial. It's so good. The visuals execution is so good, and it's a simple story. Even though it's so simple, it's also so effective because you have a talented writer. And let's face it, Stephen Moffat is a talented writer, but he hasn't really done much good since Day of the Doctor. So finally, we see him coming full out again like he used to be. We're back to peak Moffat, and it's really, really great. We have a super talented director. We have a super talented cast. And a super talented team. It just looks so spectacularly visually. It's so good. It's such a great episode. We need more episodes like this. We need more Heaven Sent. No more Hellbents. We need more Heaven Sents. We need this. These are the episodes we enjoy. These are the episodes we like. Stephen Moffat at his best. Fantastic direction, especially from this director, who is considered one of the best directors of the show, and this performance from Peter Capaldi, I wouldn't be surprised if people weren't so keen on Capaldi in Series 8 or earlier in Series 9, this would be the episode that would win him over, if they hadn't already been. And if you were already a Capaldi fan, well, this is chocolate and candy for you. That's this episode. It's having your cake and eating it. Unfortunately, the next episode replaced that cake with a big pile of shit. With a shit on top. So, that's my ranking of Doctor Who Series 9. And to recap the list, number 11, Hellbent. Obviously. Number 10, The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. Also obviously. Number 9, Sleep No More. Number 8, Face the Raven. Number 7, Last Christmas, I Gave You My Heart. Oh boy, if only I had actually done that in the review. Number 6, The Woman Who Lived. Number 5, The Zygon Invasion and The Zygon Inversion. Number 4, The Husbands of River Song. Number 3, The Girl Who Died. Number 2, Under the Lake and Before the Flood. And number 1, Heaven Sent. So that's my ranking of Doctor Who Series 9. As I mentioned, I don't think this one is that bad anymore. I think it's actually a decent series. I mean, there are some bad stuff, and the series arc is definitely the weakest series arc we have in any season or series. It's the weakest story arc, and there are some weaker elements of this series, but for the most part, I actually kind of enjoyed it. Maybe even more than Series 7 or 8. These three series is kind of on a similar level now, because my opinion of this series has gone up. So these three series are kind of on a similar level. So, yeah, that's my ranking of Doctor Who Series 9. Comment down below. What do you think? Please don't make an essay. Just summarise. Also, if you're going to rank the stories, I will be fine with you ranking individual episodes, but I prefer you to rank the two-parters as one story. It might be a bit more difficult for some of you, but please, it's just... if you're doing classic series as overall stories, then you have to do the same here. Otherwise, you have to do the classic series individual episodes, and that's even harder. So anyway, that's my rank of Series 9, which means we've done it. We've reviewed every single Doctor Who story and ranked every single Doctor Who series and season, as I mentioned at the end of my Husbands of River Song review. But I will be doing revisitation reviews for the following 3 series. So the adventure continues. Yay! Next time we've got the last series with Peter Capaldi as the 12th Doctor. Series 10. Finally, we're on to Series 10! Yay! Oh boy. And after that, we'll only have 2 more series, and then we really are done. At least until Series 13 does come around. So yeah, 3 seasons left, and we're properly done. Although technically I am already done, but in terms of this marathon and for delivering these revisitation reviews, we've got 3 more series left. So stay tuned for my revisitation reviews of Series 10, starting with The Return of Dr. Mysterio, the 2016 Christmas special. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.